Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan here for part two of our four-part NFC East Preview Series. We do it every year, and we bring back our good friend Greg Cosell from NFL Films, from ESPN's Matchup Show, and Greg's been grinding the tape away. He already did the Washington Commanders with us. In this episode, part two, we're going to do the New York Giants. And of course, this episode is presented by our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. Greg, when we talk about the Giants, they are not as new from top to bottom as the last team, the Commanders that we did, where it's new GM, new ownership,
Right.
new quarterback. But there is a lot of new blood here with the Giants. Obviously, Brian Daboll is back, and Joe Schoen is the GM, and ownership is the same. But there's some new intriguing players. And last episode, I wanted to start off with you. I did with Washington about its draft because you are so into seeing the tape. And I was also intrigued by the Giants draft, to be honest with you, between Malik Neighbors, Tyler Nubin, the safety from Minnesota, Andrew Phillips, the corner from Kentucky, and Theo Johnson, the Penn State tight end, who, of course, I see a lot of. I thought the first four picks were interesting to me, and I remember talking about some of these guys with you and Adam when we had you on the Intel with Greg Cosell. So from a tape standpoint, did you feel like at least those first four guys, you remember watching tape? Did it strike you in any way?
Oh, yeah. Well, Johnson becomes really interesting now with the retirement of Darren Waller, but we'll get
Yeah.
to that. Well, Malik Neighbors is just a really, really high-level prospect. I mean, I still felt Marvin Harrison would have been number one on my board, but if Harrison was a 10, Neighbors was a 9.98. I mean, he's a big, big-time prospect. He's got number one wide receiver traits stamped all over him. He's physical. He can line up anywhere. He is a monster run after catch. His lower body from the waist down is as strong as any receiver I can remember. His ability to stop, and that's always overlooked about receivers running routes. And I learned this, and I know you guys have spoken with him as well. I learned this from our friend TJ Hushmanzada about the ability to stop when you're running routes, and Neighbors is really, really good at it. And a lot of times you'll see him stop, and the corner takes 5 steps to stop. And you see that even in the NFL with corners, that they just take a long time to stop. So Neighbors is a big time prospect. He'll be their number one receiver pretty quickly. Then they went defense. Tyler Nubin was again, I don't necessarily do lists, but Tyler Nubin was my number one safety prospect in this draft. I thought he was really, really good on the back end. I thought his ability to understand routes and to read the quarterback was as high level as you see from a college safety. You don't see that very often in college safeties. Just his ability to understand all of that and then react to it. So and in addition to being able to play on the back end at a high level, I thought he ran the alley really well as a run defender. It would not surprise me if he's a day one starter. And then you had the Drew Phillips kid. He's the kid from Kentucky. And I think he's another really good prospect who's likely going to start at slot corner. So, from a defensive perspective, I think they really helped themselves with those two players. We'll get into some more of their defensive players as well. Do you want to stay on defense?
Yes.
Jump back to the offense.
Sure.
Yeah, because that is the area where we see the newness, right? Because
Coordinator.
schematically they're going to be different. They say goodbye
Totally.
to Wink Martindale, who wakes up blitzing, and then they bring in from the Titans, correct?
Yep.
Shane Bowen, yes.
Shane Bowen
brought from the
probably
Titans.
is one of the more underrated names because I guess Tennessee's not a big market, but people in the NFL love Shane Bowen.
Yes, and they clearly, and whether it came from Daboll or Shane or both, Adam might know the answer to that better than I, they clearly wanted a different approach defensively because we know what Wink Martindale did. He wanted to play a lot of man. He pressures. Shane Bowen is not that kind of coordinator. Now, he pressures, but he's much more about safe pressure. And I think they wanted to move in that direction. They wanted to move away from the kind of pressure where you put your corners on an island and you expect them to be able to match up man to man. Now, I think Banks, the rookie from Maryland a year ago, is going to be a really good corner. But Shane Bowen is much more about safe pressure. And when I say safe pressure, I mean not compromising or sacrificing coverage to rush. So in other words, he's much more of a zone pressure guy and much more of what we call a sim pressure guy, meaning that you rush four, but one or two of the four are either linebackers or DBs, and you're dropping out defensive linemen into underneath coverage. So in other words, you're not sacrificing bodies. Okay, that's the key. The more you bring in terms of pressure, the fewer you have on the back end, because defense and coverage is a numbers game. You'd like to be able to rush with four. If you have to rush with five, you can either play man behind it or zone behind it. Shane Bowen prefers to play zone behind it, which means it becomes a safer pressure scheme. And it's clear that they wanted a philosophical change in how they play defense.
So, Greg, now you add Brian Burns. We'll get into him, and you talked about Thibodeau on our show many times. Ojulari's back. They added Boogie Basham on a trade last year. I know he's hadn't done much, but he's on the roster. And obviously with Dexter Lawrence is terrific. Do you think they have enough of a pass rush group?
They do, because Brian Burns is big time.
Okay.
And Brian Burns is also a guy that you can move around, but he's really good off the edge. He's Gumby-ish. He's flexible. That was a big time move for them. Really big time move. Thibodeau's a solid player. I looked at, obviously I watched the Giants a ton last year. They're in the same division with the Eagles, obviously. Yep. Thibodeau's not a great individual pass rusher. He's solid. I think all of his sacks but one last year were what we call ancillary sacks, not sacks where he beat the tackle, but sacks where he kind of cleaned up and it was way later in the down. But he's solid. He's not a bad player, and maybe he'll continue to improve going into his third year, I believe. And Dexter Lawrence, Dexter Lawrence is arguably the best interior defensive lineman in the league. This guy, for his size, has ballet-like feet. And don't sleep on Jordan Phillips. He was a really solid player in Buffalo. Really, just a really good player to have in the interior. So this is a pretty good D-line. If you go to linebacker, it's a really good group too, by the way, because Okereke is really good, really good. And Micah McFadden, who was a 5th-round pick 2 years ago out of Indiana, he ended up playing a ton of snaps a year ago, and he's kind of an emerging player. Probably not a star, but you know how every team needs one of those linebackers that's just really, really solid in all areas? He's that guy. So this is not a bad front group at all.
Actually, Greg, I think it's been held back by the offensive pitfalls lately, but if you're just talking about a front four rush and you're talking about Brian Burns, Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Azeez Ojulari was hurt last year. Maybe
and he's got pass rush traits, by the way.
Yeah. This could be a pretty good front four if the rest of the environment could allow it to flourish.
Without question. And like I said, they are going to philosophically be totally different, as Adam well knows. This is not going to be a situation where they put their corners and their safeties in untenable situations.
Greg, staying on defense, the one thing, and you talked about Deonte Banks, who's a second-year corner, was a first-rounder last year, but as far as outside corners opposite him, I just struggle to see that one guy. You go, okay, that they're going to be good there. What are you thinking opposite Banks? What does that look like to you?
It's probably going to be a training camp decision. It would not surprise me, and I know he's light, but I think he has traits. If Cordell Flott becomes that guy, he's just light, but I think he's got the traits to play on the outside. If it doesn't work out with him, then it's any number. Then it's a training camp thing, Adam, which I can't. We can't answer that right now, because then you're going to have McLeod. You're going to have Hawkins. You're going to have even Trey Herndon, who ended up playing in the slot predominantly in Jacksonville the last year or two, but started out in Jacksonville playing on the outside. Not overly well, by the way, but he's got a lot of experience playing on the outside.
Oh, you know who's still there? I know he didn't play last season because he was come back with an ACL, is Aaron Robinson. Did you like Aaron Robinson?
I did. Yeah. I thought he was probably at his best inside, but again, now you're dealing with, he could be an outside guy. That's the spot they're looking for. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's funny because Robinson, and even Darnay Holmes is still there, Greg. I mean, he's a guy who from the
He's really
nickel
struggled,
a couple of weeks ago, a couple of years ago, we thought was an upcoming player.
and he struggled in man. Again, the reason a lot of this could change, guys, is totally different philosophy of how to play. I mean, when you see guys get burned man to man, maybe if when they play more zone or play different techniques in man, maybe they end up being better players.
Sure.
Darnay Holmes has a pretty good skill set, but it just hasn't worked out with the focus, the heavy focus on man coverage. So we'll see how all this plays out. That's really hard to know right now.
All right, we'll move on to the offense in a second. First, we want to pause to hear a word from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
All right, as we just move away from the defense and put a bow on it, Greg, I mean, there's some talent there, especially in the front four, as we said. The one thing you don't see maybe is just a bona fide playmaker on the back end, like someone who's known to flip the field or, I guess we'll see what Deonte Banks, he's a young kid and he could be, but, sometimes teams have those guys.
The one other player may be worth mentioning because they did re-sign him. And I have no idea how Shane Bowen will see fit to deploy him is Isaiah Simmons. Because Simmons is obviously a high level athlete. He's had a lot of issues with understanding, how to play. And, sometimes I wonder if some of that was caught up in, this guy can play 22 positions, which is a ridiculous thing when people say that. Because when you're a rookie, you've got to come in the league and you've got to be taught a position because you've got to be taught how to play in the NFL. And, again, I don't know Isaiah Simmons, and I don't know what Shane Bowen sees with him, but you're dealing with a 6'4", 240-pound stud athlete. So when the Giants got him last year, they used him a lot as a pass rusher, and he showed some flashes. So we'll see. Again, late June, that's an unknown, but you're dealing with a high-level traits athlete.
Good stuff. All right. So moving back to the offense, it's probably hard to be Daniel Jones coming off an ACL injury and, reading the reports that the Giants did everything they possibly could to try to move up to get, I think it was Drake May that the Giants were eyeing. But he is back and, there's not a whole lot of tape to watch from him last year because of the ACL tear. But so 2 years ago, he did help the Giants make the playoffs. You got Malik Neighbors now. Where are you at with Daniel Jones and what the tape might look like?
I still think Daniel Jones can be one of those solid NFL starters, mid-range guy who, if the offense functions with complementary pieces and has meaningful balance, whatever that means in terms of your approach, that he can function. Is he ever going to be, the sixth pick in the draft and be that kind of player? No, but I think you can line him up and play if everything else works. Now they need their offensive line, which was atrocious a year ago. They need a run game. That's a question right now. They obviously signed Devin Singletary. He'll be, I assume, their number one back.
He will. Yep, for sure.
So, again, he's solid, but, can he define a run game? That remains to be seen. They've lost the tight end Waller, who, was obviously a gifted player, but was hurt a lot. So now they don't really have a true receiving tight end weapon unless a rookie, Theo Johnson, who is athletic. I remember walking right past him at the combine, and he is a big freaking dude and just looks the part. But again, he's a rookie who was a fourth-round pick. So, Daniel Bellinger's a nice player. He's one of those nice tight ends, but they don't really have a tight end that would scare defenses.
Greg, what's interesting about the tight end position? They added 2 wide tight ends. Chris Manhertz is in the NFL and highly paid because he's a wide tight end. All he does is block. Jack Stoll was a wide tight end for the Eagles. I'm not saying they're going to be a run team. I don't see that happening with Brian Daboll, but it just makes you wonder, will there be more 12 personnel or 11? I think there's debate, because this moves back to you. How good do you think this receiver core is overall?
Well, I think based on their receivers, they would like to be an 11 personnel team.
Okay.
Because they have neighbors, okay?
Yep.
They have Slayton, who he can still run. So there's value there. Don't forget, Jalen Hyatt was, he was drafted a year ago. Word is he's added some bulk. I mean, whatever that means, we don't know that until all this happens. But I mean, neighbors, Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, a second-round pick, okay? Now he's a certain kind of player, but he could be good in that role. Isaiah McKenzie, not a star, but another guy that sort of has a certain kind of value. So I think they ultimately, based on personnel, Adam would like to be 11, but, we don't know that yet.
So you look at the offensive line, Greg, and, I don't know much about Jermaine Illuminor from coming over from the Raiders. I know he's a North Jersey guy who is about as ecstatic as you can be to have signed with the Giants based on his Twitter account. John Runyon, we've seen him play for the Packers. Can go
solid.
Yeah.
Solid.
So, solid upgrades, which is what they need. Not a big fan of the center. What was his tape like last year? I thought the kid the Jets drafted out of Wisconsin was going to be a better player than
I did too.
Schmitz.
But Schmitz was still a second-round pick, and he's I didn't get a great feel for him, to be honest, so I don't know. I didn't love him coming out of Minnesota, so I'm not gonna, all of a sudden say, boy, he's great.
Right.
I didn't study him enough individually a year ago to really have a sense, but clearly, as a second-round pick, they expect him to at least be a quality player. I think the big question is right tackle, because Evan Neal's not been very good. And he was a high first-round pick. And if he ends up not being good, then I would have been wrong on him, which would not have been the first time. It does happen. You get guys wrong. He has an issue that just he's not been able to deal with, and that's at the top of the pass set arc. He just has major balance and body control issues.
Yeah, I mean, if he struggles, right, do they move Illuminor? Can he play right tackle? And
he was
Zudu at left guard.
He's Jermaine Illuminor is probably seen more as a right tackle than a guard. I know he could do both.
Right.
I know they feel good about their depth, but man, overall, it's better. It's the most talent they've had in years. We know Thomas is a stud left tackle. He missed a lot of time last season with a problematic hamstring issue. You mentioned John Michael Schmitz, but you add Illuminor and Runyon, who are going to start, obviously. The only question with Illuminor is he start at right tackle. I'd be very surprised I'd be very surprised, just to add this, if Evan Neal's are starting right tackle, based on what I've heard. Greg just talked
the
about,
other thing too is I think Illuminor could play right tackle, and I personally really liked Joshua Zidu from North Carolina.
Yeah,
he could play left guard.
Now, was he hurt last year? Is that why he didn't establish himself?
Yeah, he's been on IR the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is an issue. You got to be available to play.
We've had a lot of guys hurt in their offensive line, man. Just a rash of injuries the last 2 years.
Yeah. So I really liked his tape, though. So, I think just from a physical perspective, I think he could be a quality starting left guard, but he's got to be able to play.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like the same conversation we had about the Commanders, which is, you've made upgrades on your offensive line, but it remains your weakest link and maybe what holds you back from taking another step, unless some of these guys pan out more so than we think.
And, every quarterback's different. Jones is a quarterback that needs an offensive line. And I don't want people to hear that and think, well, every quarterback does. Some can camouflage and compensate for weaknesses or work better in muddied pockets than others. Jones is not that guy right now. Jones he's big, he's tall, he's a strider. He needs space. So they need the offensive line to work.
Right.
Let's go back just real quick to tight end. Theo Johnson, I know you talk about he's a big dude. What did you like? What, at least in terms of pluses with him? Because he's going to they need somebody who could run. I know Bellinger's not great.
No, he's athletic.
So let's talk about that. Yeah.
He's got everything you want, but Penn State did not. They had a number of tight ends, and he did not put up big numbers. I think he's viewed as a pretty good prospect, though. I mean, that's the way I felt, and from what I heard, I remember being at the combine, and he's an athletic kid. Could he develop into a number one type tight end? maybe. I think there's a feeling that he could be that, but is that likely to happen, week 1 or 2 or 3, or even in his rookie season? I think that'd be asking a lot.
All right, we're going to put a bow here on the Giants as we've gone through their defense and offense. I do want to ask you a little bit more on Daniel Jones coming back from this injury and what to expect. First, we've been telling everybody, if you're not using the Game Time app for tickets to events, concerts, comedy shows, anything near you, you are missing out. Game Time is by far the best ticket app out there that allows you to go to any event you want to see. That they've got this great summer concert series that we've been talking about. You could see Adele, Olivia Rodrigo, Bruno Mars, Morgan Wallen, Pearl Jam, Billy Joel, Lady Gaga, Noah Kahan, the Rolling Stones, Garth Brooks, George Strait, Chris Stapleton, Pink, and Bruce Springsteen. That is a star-studded lineup right there, and you can get tickets to see any of them using the Game Time app. Remember, they have got the flash deals that allow you to save even more with in-app deals on select seats that are ahead of the game or the event. There's the zone deals that allow you to save when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. There's the panoramic view that the app gives you from your seat, so you know exactly where you're sitting and what it looks like before you buy the ticket. And of course, the Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. That is the Game Time app. And if you can find a lower price anywhere else, that's where the Game Time guarantee comes into play. They credit you 110% of the difference. Why not get your Phillies tickets on the Game Time app right now? Go see the hottest show in town if you're in the Delaware Valley, because the Phillies are on fire, and you can get great tickets to see them using the Game Time app. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code BIRDS, because the Eagle season will be starting soon, and you can get great tickets to the Eagles on the Game Time app as well. So use the code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code BIRDS, BIRDS, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we also want to stop and hear a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you stop in a Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. Greg, in the past, Daniel Jones has hurt the Eagles as a runner, more so than as a thrower. I think he's like the 4th leading rusher against the Eagles over the last 5 or 6 years. I always like to pull up that stat when we did our pregame show. He's had some really explosive plays, but he's coming back from an injury here. And that was a big staple of their game. Do you think that maybe that changes a little bit where with the addition of Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt year 2, that maybe they try to branch out a little bit and make him more of a stationary quarterback who can move around the pocket?
Well, I think they'd like it to change. That's the question. Can it change? Can Daniel Jones develop at this point to where you feel comfortable? There was a stretch 2 years ago before he got hurt last year, late in the season, where they did open it up a little bit. I remember the Minnesota regular season game where I believe he threw over 30 passes, and he looked very, very good delivering the football. So there seemed to be a sense toward the end of 2022 that Brian Daboll was developing more confidence in Jones to drop back and deliver the football. And then, of course, last year with no O-line, we saw what happened early in the season. He was under such duress, no one could have done anything. So that's hard to know, Geoff. But I think my sense is Brian Daboll would like him, would like the offense to work more with Jones being a more of a pocket quarterback working with a well-schemed, well-designed pass game and delivering the football. You don't draft Malik Neighbors, unless you really want to move in that direction.
Yeah, it feels like he's headed for 15 targets a game, to be honest with you, like when the early days of Justin Jefferson on a come-up offense. Adam, Drew Lock is the backup now.
Yeah.
I know how you feel about Drew Lock. I know how we feel about Drew Lock. If the Giants are 2-6, what are the odds Drew Lock becomes the quarterback?
I don't see it because Jones is making a ton of money. I mean, they can't get out of his contract. I mean, 35.5 million fully guaranteed. Now, if it's Thanksgiving and they're 3-9,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to evaluate Daniel Jones for the future in terms of,
Drew Lock, right?
Drew Lock to be the backup maybe for years to come. That's all he really is. And he's got a strong arm, but he's got accuracy issues, mechanics issues. He's not the quarterback a lot of people thought he could be. I don't know what Greg thought. I forget, Greg, coming out of Missouri. What were your thoughts on him coming out?
I thought that Locke was a guy that needed a lot of work, and if it all worked out, it could work, but he had some serious lower body mechanics issues, which impacted the way he threw the ball. He's got a really naturally strong arm.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you said if they're 3-9 around Thanksgiving, the likelihood if they're 3-9, it would be because the offensive line hasn't come together, and that would not benefit Drew Lock either.
Yeah, he's not a great mover. Hey, one more thing, Greg.
Sure.
You mentioned Devin Singletary in passing. He had a good year for the Texans. What kind of back?
He's had good years in Buffalo.
I know. What kind of back do you, when you see his tape,
I think he's kind of he's a notch or two below, a big time back. He's a solid back. He's got some shiftiness to him. He's not really an explosive back. I think if you have a complete, don't forget, yes, he did a really nice job a year ago, but when you think about the Houston Texans offense, the first thought was not Devin Singletary. So, that's why it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out, because if they feel that they have to run the ball as a true foundation of their offense, I don't know. Is Singletary truly that guy? Now, they did draft a kid who's fascinating to me named Tyrone Tracy from Purdue, who was a wide receiver when he started his college career at Iowa, and in fact caught 36 balls one year at Iowa, and then transferred to Purdue, and last year was used predominantly as a running back. He only carried 112, 113 times, but he showed some flashes of being a really interesting runner. And then he does give you that receiving element as well, because that's what he was. So I'm curious to see how Brian Daboll sees him within the context of what he wants to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting, because we know Devin Singletary is not a bell cow, so they're going to have to incorporate a second, maybe even a third guy, like you said, Tyrone.
Eric Gray is actually not a bad second back either, but these are unknown players. And when we're speaking at the end of June about unknown players, we don't know.
There you go. All right, that's going to put a bow on the New York Giants and part 2 of our 4-part NFC East Preview Series. We've done the Commanders, we've done the Giants. Next episode, we do all Eagles fans' favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys, and then we'll finish it off with the Philadelphia Eagles to finish the entire NFC East preview that we do every year. And of course, we'll be bringing back Greg Cosell with us. So thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. And we'll catch up with you again for part 3 and part 4. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.